Rahim alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen wassalatu wassalamu ala sayyidina wa maulana Muhammadin wa alihi wa azwajihi wa zurriyyatihi ajma'in. Allahumma arina al-haqqa haqqan warzuqna ittiba'ahu wa arina al-batila batilan warzuqna ijtinabah. Allahumma arina haqa'iqa al-ashya'i kama hiya. Allahumma arina haqa'iqa al-ashya'i kama hiya. Allahumma rabbana zidna ilman wa amalan wa ikhlasan. Allahumma rabbana انصر أخواننا في غزة. اللهم فرج عنا وعن إخواننا في غزة. اللهم ربنا نفس كربنا وكربهم. اللهم ثبت أقدامنا وأقدامهم والطف بهم وبنا يا رب العالمين. اللهم انصر المجاهدين في غزة وفي فلسطين وفي لبنان وفي اليمن وفي سائر بلدان المسلمين. صلى الله تعالى على رسول خير خلق محمد وآله وصحبه وأزواجه وذريته أجمعين. Yet the state remains the favored template of the Islamists and the ulama, the so-called clergymen. Why are yet the state remains the favored template of the Islamists and the ulama. I think in this context, from our perspective, irrespective of what Allah is saying, we should differentiate between two types of ulama and two types of Islamists. Yet the state remains the favorite template. So a state remains a favorite template for Islamist and ulama. I think conceptually at least we can think of two types of Islamists and two types of ulama. This state they are talking about, there are ulama and there are Islamists who take the actually existing state as their main focus, in the sense that this state is their state. So for example, for Mufti Usmani, for example, Pakistani state is their state, or for Yusuf Qaradawi, Qatari state is their state, or for Akhwan al-Muslimin, Egyptian state is their state. And these states are not fully Muslims or Islamic states, so they are trying to reform these states. So that's one type of Islamist and ulama, and we reject this approach because we think that they don't understand the nature of the modern state. I mean, you can reform individual and you can reform society, but you can't reform the modern state Islamically, because if you reform it, you will be able to reform it, but you will be reforming yourself as well because this state is either imperialist state or the agent of the imperialist state, or subservient to the imperialist state. So in that sense, trying to reform the state is basically accepting imperialism in its created world system as legitimate. And that's one thing. The second thing is you are going to incorporate yourself in the long run into this system, and while you're reforming the modern state, you're reforming yourself as well, and you're turning yourself into modernist ulama or modernist Islamists, for example, in the long run anyway. But there are other type of Islamists and ulama who treat this state as the effect of our existence, but they don't say this is our state. This is not our state, even if it is manned by Muslims. So in that sense, Qatari state is not our state. Pakistani state is not our state. Even though Qatari society and Pakistani societies are to certain extent, Islamic society, Egyptian society, to certain extent, Islamic societies manned by Islamic individuals, although that needs a lot of reform as well, and that would be part of revolution. But Egyptian state, Pakistani state, or Qatari state is not an Islamic state, not even a Muslim state in that sense. And our purpose is to transcend these states, to overcome these states, to deconstruct that state so we can create a new state in this state, which would be an Islamic state. And the process for creating that is to start creating a state within a state. So the state, Islamic state we are trying to create in Pakistan or in Egypt is not something which will come after the end of, at the end point of our. We are trying to create today. We are not trying to reform Pakistani state or Egyptian state, but trying to create, or we should be trying to create, an Islamic state within Egyptian state, Islamic state within Pakistani state or Saudi state. And to the extent this Islamic state is created and it is strengthened and it grows, one day it will overcome this state and deconstruct it, dismantle it, and establish this state which we were creating for hundreds of years. Maybe it will take 100 years at least, in Pakistan or in Egypt or in Saudi Arabia. That Islamic state would be the only legitimate state. The way, Iranian created an Islamic state. They didn't reform the Shah, the state of the Shah. They dismantled it, they deconstructed it, they overcame it and created a new state which they were creating within that state for the last 100 years before the revolution. And similarly, the Taliban movement in Afghanistan. So Afghani state and Iranian states are Islamic states. Because they overcame the imperialist created Muslim states within those countries and created a new state. So when Halak says that a state remains the favored template, he doesn't know this ambiguity or he doesn't want to know it. He basically glosses over this important distinction. In a recent and highly representative statement, the powerful Muslim brothers argue that the modern nation state, meaning the Egyptian state, or in that context, does not stand in contradiction with the implementation of Islamic Sharia, because Islam is the highest authority in Muslim lands, or so it should be. So the nation state doesn't stand in contradiction with the implementation of the Islamic Sharia, because Islam is the highest authority in Muslim lands, or so it should be. With its mechanism, regulation, laws, and system, the modern state if it contains no contradiction to the founding and indubitable principle, Islam does not preclude the possibility of being developed so that being developed this same state so that we can benefit from it, achieving ourselves progress and advancement in the sense that we can turn it into. So this is the reform strategy or whatever it's worth. So that's the Ikhwan al-Muslimun strategy. So I mean, if you are critiquing Ikhwan al-Muslimun or Jamaat Islami, that's the legitimate critique in the sense that they are no longer seeking revolution. They have basically adopted Pakistani state as the de jure, if not de facto, Islamic states. Egypt and Pakistan for Ikhwan al-Muslimin, Jamaat Islami represent respectively are de jure, if not de facto, Islamic states. But that's because they have transformed themselves into reform movements rather than revolutionary movement. But to infer from that that's the only Islamic perspective on this is wrong, because Iranian experience in Afghanistan, belies this. We have the second group of ulama and Islamists who don't want to reform, or we say that this state, the modern state, stands in contradiction with the Islamic State and Islam, because this Pakistani state and this Egyptian state is part and parcel of the imperialist system, and Islam is in contradiction with the imperialist system, because imperialism is based on capitalism. Islam totally rejects capitalism. It is the exact opposite of capitalism. But if the reformist ulama and Islamists say that no, we can capture Egyptian state, for example, through election or whatever, and turn it into Islamic state, we say you can't do that because you will create a Islamist Egyptian state like or Pakistani Islamist state, which will keep the state structures of the imperialist funded and imperialist subservient Egyptian and Pakistani states, and will ultimately absorb Islam as a tool of imperialism. But from this we don't conclude that Egyptian state, Islamic state, Pakistani states should not be our concern. They should be our concern, but our concern should be to create Islamic state within Egyptian state, Islamic state within Pakistani states, which will eventually overcome and destroy these existing states and instead create and erect the sovereignty of the Islamic states, which we have been developing alongside these states, or which we would have been developing alongside these states. So In a sense, we would say Halak's, if this is his criticism of Ikhwan Jamaat Islami is legitimate, but the intentions of the criticisms are not legitimate in the sense that it ignores the other alternative which focuses on this state but in order to overcome it, not in order to reform it. Okay, note that developed here should be taken to mean adapted to our needs. Okay, that's what reform means. So in that sense, Ikhwan is a reformist party, Jamaat Islami is a reformist party. They are no longer revolutionary parties. And that's one of the negative impact of reformist ideologies like that of Yusuf Qaradawi and Taqi Usmani and all those people. Any attempt by the nation state to quarantine religion or undermine commitment to the superior authority of Islam will no doubt be rejected by any Muslim. Thus, the state is expected to promote Islamic value. Yes, it is expected, but which state? That's the main question. That question, Halak doesn't raise this question. Like McIntyre, for example, raises this question in the context of justice, and rationality. Which justice, which rationality, whose justice, whose rationality. So when he said the state is expected to, so the use of state is ambiguous. We expect the Islamic state to promote Islamic value, but not the Muslim state or Egyptian state or Pakistani state. So thus the state is expected to promote Islamic values, including general public interest, the rule of law, freedom, and equal. Again, when we talk about rule of law, which law? Modern Muslim states like Egyptian states and Pakistani states, they promote the rule of law of capital. But the Islamic state would promote the rule of law of Islam. And obviously, Islam doesn't promote freedom and equal opportunity for all citizens. That's not the purpose of Islamic State. The purpose of Islamic State is, and obviously, the people, the individuals within Islamic states are not citizens. They are ibadullah. They are either ibadullah, and ibadullah can be Muslims. Ibadullah can be, Zimmis, or the non-Muslim members of Islamic State, but they are not citizens. They are ibadullah. And to deepen the conception of citizenship, deepen the conception of abdiyat and to promote Islam. That's the only purpose of Islamic states. So that's why these reformist Muslim states are not Islamic state, because they are promoting freedom and equal opportunity and deepening the conception of citizenship, which is obviously a modernist notion. In our understanding of what Islam means, these are the tasks that the modern state should accomplish. So that's the Ikhwan's position, and that's, I think, is a wrong-headed position, a reformist position. A subtitle to the document sums it up: there is no contradiction between nation state and Islamic Sharia. Okay, let's talk about that. There's no contradiction between nation state, meaning Egyptian state or Pakistani state, and Islamic Sharia, Islam, the command of Allah subhanahu. But we say there is a contradiction because nation state is necessarily imperialist, subservient to imperialist state in the sense that it is situated within an imperialist system through the United Nations and its institution, as well as other international institutions, which are basically American created and sustained. And if you are subservient to imperialism, you mean you are a capitalist state, and it doesn't matter whether your capitalism is Islamic capitalism or reformed capitalism. So in that sense, nation state is in contradiction with Islamic Sharia, because Islam rejects capitalism and creates a civilization whose main purpose is to call all the mankind to Islam, so that they can seek the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They can worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this world, so they can be successful in hereafter. That's the purpose of Islamic State. There's no other purpose. The purpose of Islamic State to propagate Islam and Islamic civilization, so that all people in this world, all mankind, can go seek Allah's pleasure and can, go attain the right result in the hereafter and live an eternal life, not in this world but hereafter. The purpose of Islamic State is not creating paradise on this earth. Muslim nation state, their purpose is to create paradise in this earth. So in that sense, they are in contradiction with this. And when Islamic movements or ulama accept these nation states, they accept this basic principle, and they basically ignore the fact that the basic duty of an Islamic state is to propagate Islam, so that more and more people are able to become Muslims, so that they can seek Allah's forgiveness and His pleasure, His eternal pleasure. So that's and if you, for example, go through this list which Allah the quotation from is Akhwan Muslimun, brings up, you'll see that this the difference between Islamic reformism and Islamic revolutionary approach becomes very clear. Let's go through them one by one. So according to this document, the purpose of Muslim or Islamic Egypt, for example, or Islamic Pakistan would be, firstly, to deepen citizenship. Now, Islamic revolutionary approach is now the purpose of Islamic State would be to cancel citizenship and build a new form of membership of Islamic State, and that was its members would be all slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Muslims as well as non-Muslim, and they will be members of this Islamic State and have rights and duties of given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through His command as members of this Islamic State. So that's the first thing. But that's the first difference between an Islamic reformist state and the Islamic state, if you want to call it. That's the first difference. The second thing is, so I'll note them down first so we don't waste too much time. So these are Islamist conceptions. So we reject citizenship. We reject rule of law, because this is rule of the law of capital. And we reject freedom and equality. Instead, we promote worship and taqwa, and want to create a society based on these values, not these values. And obviously we don't want to, our purpose is not to create a heaven on this earth. which will eventually be hell. Obviously, if you try to create a heaven on this earth, that would for sure be hell, as the experience of capitalism has shown and the experience of modernity has shown. What we want to create on this earth is a civilization which worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to seek his eternal pleasure, and to promote that worship to all those who are willing to accept it. So in that sense, we agree that there's a contradiction in modern nation state and Islamic state. Islamic state is a jihadi state, and by jihadi state we mean purpose is to propagate Islam, so that more and more people can become Muslim, seek pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not creating, its purpose is not to create a welfare Islamic state, for example, or social democracy or liberal democracy. So in that sense we agree with this point. But from this, a lot of simple-minded Muslims might be misled that halak is promoting something Islamic. He's not saying that Muslim state, nation state and Islamic states are contradiction in terms. What he is assuming is that Islamic state cannot be but a nation. Islamic state cannot be, let me write there. What halak is assuming is that Islamic state can only be a nation state. We say Islamic state cannot be a nation state and should not be a nation state, and we accept that Islamic state is in contradiction with nation state. So the purpose of halak's criticism is not to promote Islamic state. The purpose of halak is for us to reject Islamic reformism and forget about modern state. So that's seems to be his agenda. On the other hand, we want to reject Islamic reformism in favor of Islamic revolutionary approach, which accept that modern nation state is in contradiction with Islamic principle, but we say there can be an Islamic state which is not a nation state, a universalist state. But of course, every Islamic state will be built as a nation state, because that's what we have as a fact. But that Islamic state will not define itself as nation state, as we can see from the experience of Taliban in Iran. And Iran, to the extent that it is becoming a nation state, or it is not fully a universalist Islamic state, that's its weakness. But that doesn't mean that we can't have a Islamic state which is a universalist state. So we will create Islamic state which would be nation state to start with, because that's all we are working in reality and within reality. But we are working in reality and within reality to transcend this reality. So today, if we have enough Islamic states within existing boundaries of Muslim nations, then we will be able to transcend those boundaries. That's the hope, anyway. So for so far anyway, what we accept is that what we accept from halak's position here is that nation state is contradictory to Islamic Sharia. Not just Islamic Sharia, but Islamic civilization, because nation state might be able to adopt part of Sharia, but not Islamic civilization. So we accept that contradiction, but we reject his inference from that there can't be an Islamic state which is not a nation state. And from nation state is in contradiction with Islamic Sharia. We don't accept his claim or implicit claim that Islamic state is in contradiction with the Islamic Sharia, because that would be tantamount to saying that our experiences to date exhaust the possibilities, which is not the case. Okay, I think we'll stop here and we'll continue from here, inshallah.